Joshua clutched at his side, feeling the warm, sticky feeling of blood pooling out from under his torn shirt. His breathing came out in short, ragged gasps as his lungs burned with a dying need. Sweat trickled down his face, falling into his eyes, blinding him with a salty burn. Above him stood a woman he once thought was as beautiful and pure as moonlight. Serena stared down at him, her blue eyes glowing with a silver light. Her pure white hair fluttered in an unseen wind. Her lips, as soft and pink as a cherry blossom petal, were twisted in a cold sneer that turned his blood cold. In her hand was the very knife that had inflicted the wound on Joshua's side. She bent down and grabbed one of his hands. Forcing his bloody fingers to move, she wrapped his hand around the hilt of the knife. After standing up, she removed the blood-stained gloves from her hands and shoved them into a hidden pocket of her dress. "Why?" Joshua breathed out, barely able to feel his lips moving. Her sneer turned into a twisted grin that reminded him of one that a monster lurking under a bed would wear. "Why wouldn't I? You were a foolish, rich young master. It was too easy to get you to fall for me. Too easy to steal your wealth. And now, it's too easy to get rid of disgusting trash." Joshua listened to her words with a steadily growing hatred festering from deep within the recesses of his soul. She did all of this just so she could have my money. My wealth. Joshua thought to himself with utter disbelief, allowing the hatred and anger to rise and grow. "If I survive this, I will kill you, Serena." Joshua vowed to himself, his legs growing cold and numb. The numbness slowly but quickly spread to the rest of his body. In what felt like hours upon agonizing hours but was in reality only a few minutes, Joshua Moon died. Joshua sucked in a deep breath of air, his heart thumping wildly in his chest. His head ached and his eyes blurred as he bolted upright. He was alive. Joshua couldn't believe it. He had somehow survived. But if he was alive, then that meant that Serena was out there somewhere. "Serena!" Joshua shouted silently in anger. "I will find you." But if he was still alive, did that mean that Serena's plan had failed? With a shaky breath, Joshua forced his eyes to focus, to see everything around him. His quick, shallow breath stalled until he wasn't breathing at all. He was in a massive room that was easily 600 square feet in size. The bed he was laying on was large enough to fit 5 full-grown men on it and still have room. An ornately carved writing desk was fitted perfectly in one corner of the room, and on it was a complete gaming setup. He looked around at the off-white walls and had a startling realization. This wasn't the master bedroom of the house he had lived in with Serena, but the bedroom he had used while living with his parents when he was younger. "Is this my hell or my heaven?" Joshua asked himself, his words a barely heard whisper in the quiet room. There was a knock on the bedroom door then, puzzling Joshua even more. "Come in," he called out with a shaky breath. Am I about to meet an angel or devil? But he was greeted with neither. Coming in through the now open door was Charles, his family's butler. But Charles was still alive and kicking when I died, so how is he here? Joshua asked himself silently, confusion feeling him more and more as each second passed by. "Young Master Joshua, you wanted me to wake you so that you will have ample time to prepare for your date with Miss Serena," Charles informed him. "Is everything all right, young master?" Charles asked him when he noticed the condition Joshua was in, a concerned gaze flickering to him. "My date with Serena. Wait, I remember this. I had asked Charles to wake me for my first date with Serena. But I had that my senior year of high school. That was 3 years ago. What is today's date?" Joshua asked, his heart thudding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "It's August 12th, the year of 20XX, Charles replied, his tone of voice and expression never changing. This is 3 years in the past?" Joshua practically screamed in his head, his fists clenching around the blanket laying over his legs. He flung the blanket off of him and stood up. "You said I had a date with Serena?" he asked, his tongue darting out to pick his lips. "Yes, young master," Charles replied with a calmness that did not match what Joshua was feeling. "I prepared gifts for her, right?" If Joshua remembered correctly, he had bought her a sapphire jewelry set that cost several $100,000 for her. "Yes, young master." Joshua looked out the balcony window of his room and he caught a small smirk on his reflection's lips. Send everything I bought for Serena to Chelsea Arnold. Chelsea was practically Serena's arch-nemesis. Though now that Joshua thought about it, it was Serena who had stirred public opinion by articulating polished sentences that perfectly framed Chelsea while making Serena look like the perfect White Lotus. Charles blinked once, the only sign of him being caught off guard. I shall send them right away. What about your date with Miss Serena? I won't be going, Joshua answered coldly. Serena wishes to attain the moon wealth. I won't allow her to do so. Joshua had no problem telling Charles this much. Now that Charles knew that Joshua considered Serena an enemy, he would do everything in his power to help Joshua by keeping her at bay. Joshua knew this with a certainty that could not be denied, and that was simply because Charles really hated gold diggers. The elderly butler had seen plenty of them while working for Joshua's parents and grandparents. The weekend passed by and Joshua found himself in class. He had spent the last couple of days going over his memories and collecting information. Just because he had a good memory did not mean he could recall every single little detail that happened 3 years ago. He walked into the classroom with a confident swag, one that he had refused to let show in his last life because he believed that Serena wouldn't like it. It wasn't long after he sat down that Serena walked into the room. As soon as she saw him, her eyes widened and tears dotted them, threatening to spill over. Josh! She cried softly. I thought something had happened to you. You didn't show up to our date and I couldn't get a hold of you. Of course she couldn't get a hold of me, Joshua thought to himself. The first thing I did was block her number. I couldn't bother with it, he said with a shrug, his attitude completely different from what it had been the week before. Several eyes turned in their direction. Their classmates instantly started whispering loudly amongst themselves since they couldn't believe that the love-sick Joshua was treating his goddess so coldly. Just then, the door opened and a cold-looking beauty walked in. Joshua whistled to himself. He had honestly never paid attention to Chelsea since she was deemed as a Serena hater. But man, had Joshua been blind back then. Then his eyes narrowed on to what was around her neck. Nestled against her pale and defined collarbone was a magnificent sapphire necklace. It looked beautiful with her sea blue eyes and her warm, blonde hair. Chelsea, Joshua's cold face suddenly turned soft as he greeted the girl. Chelsea, uncaring of the stares and whispers going on about her, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and leaned down, her face coming close to Joshua's. You sent me gifts, she said simply, and it wasn't a question. I did, Joshua confirmed simply. Beside them, Serena's pout deepened. Joshua ignored her and gently lingered the necklace around Chelsea's neck. It suits you perfectly. The teacher came after that and the class settled down with bated breath, their impatience growing with each passing breath. When class ended, Chelsea stopped Joshua from leaving. Once everyone was out of the classroom, Chelsea crossed her arms over her ample bosoms. What kind of game are you playing? Chelsea demanded in a calm and chilling her voice, her smile now replaced with a cold and distrustful look. Right, I was known as a Serena simp in this life, Joshua thought to himself with a mocking tone. I'm not playing anything. He laid a hand on top of the desk, but his eyes stared straight into Chelsea's. I realized that Serena isn't a White Lotus and is only after my wealth and the connections that the moon name can bring. Chelsea's expression didn't change. And what does that have to do with me? She asked, her tone still cold and distrustful. I realized that you were a better choice, Joshua said while he was thinking about how Chelsea had actually become an extremely successful and domineering CEO, though he couldn't actually remember what her company actually did. But she was beautiful and smart, and Joshua realized, albeit a little too late, that she was a far better choice than a fake White Lotus. Call him shallow, but he wanted to live as himself without having to pretend to be something he was not, and Chelsea was the perfect person to help him do just that. Plus, they both hated Serena with a passion. Chelsea's eyes flickered after hearing his answer. And that answer is supposed to convince me that you aren't still after Serena. Chelsea's voice turned cold and she sneered when she said Serena's name. No, Joshua said simply. But I hope my future actions can convince you. The two of them separated after that. When Joshua returned home, he asked Charles to have someone to find out everything they could on Serena and Chelsea. He was hoping to find something to use to destroy Serena while hoping to find out what Chelsea was like when she wasn't at school. Yeah, he was going to do everything he could to make himself fall in love with Chelsea, though he had a feeling that that wouldn't require much effort on his part. Seriously, how stupid was his past self to not even notice someone as beautiful as Chelsea? After eating dinner alone since his parents were away for a business meeting, he looked at the clock. With a tap of his finger, he stood up and grabbed a jacket. "I'll have a car ready for you, young master," Charles said, instantly fishing a phone out of his pocket. Joshua gave a curt nod, not actually paying much attention. His mind was running through an idea that had popped in his head. If he wanted to show his sincerity to Chelsea, he decided that picking out a personal gift by hand would be a good start. "Head to Everson's boutique," Joshua told the driver, sliding into the back seat. As he was browsing the collection of purses that Everson's boutique carried, the door chimed, alerting everyone that another potential customer had walked in. "Huh?" Joshua heard the scoff that sounded strangely familiar but one that he couldn't place. Ignoring it, he continued looking at the latest trends in purses and handbags. "Look who we have here. The simp in the flesh." The words were harsh and mocking. Hearing the mocking tone in them, Joshua finally placed the voice. Even after figuring out who the voice belonged to, he still ignored it. "Hey, simp." A hand shoves his shoulder. Joshua looked up then and his eyes turned frosty. "Max." His voice is cold and curt. Max Lauberg, the youngest son of a rival company that's in the same business as his father's. "What brings you here?" Joshua asks coldly. "This is a woman's boutique. Since when did you get a girlfriend, or is this a personal hobby?" Anger tinges Joshua's voice. The guy was a childish bully and nothing important, but he was grating on Joshua's nerves. He had too much to do and did not want to waste any time on him. Max grew red in the face as anger filled him. Joshua ignored him and grabbed a delicate black handbag that he had his eyes on. He had a feeling that its glossy black fabric and silver decorations would look good with Chelsea. You. Joshua left the stammering Max behind. After purchasing the handbag, he tried to think of what else to get for Chelsea. Serena was always happy to receive jewelry and accessories even if she had pretended that it was too much for her. Joshua looked down at the bag that was delicately and expertly wrapped. Was he making a mistake by handpicking such gifts? And Chelsea came from money, so was it really considered thoughtful to just buy her something that she could attain herself? Joshua groaned to himself, realizing the loop he had thrown himself in. It was all his fault. He should have tried chasing other girls instead of just focusing on one. "Well, I guess I'll just be chasing one girl again in this life, though this time it will be Chelsea instead of Serena," Joshua thought to himself. Joshua arrived home after dark, a serious expression on his face. He had looked at other stores but had decided to only buy the handbag. "What can I do to show my sincerity? Even if I can win her over, I have a feeling that she will play along with me just to spite Serena." Joshua flopped face down onto his bed that was as soft as a cloud. Why did those two hate each other? Serena always tried to frame Chelsea while Chelsea always tried to one-up her either by clothes or by grades. Hopefully, he will know the answer to that soon. The next day came and Joshua carried the wrapped handbag with him to school. "Joshua," Serena cried, her blue eyes wide with tears in them. "I thought you were nice but you've been so cold to me." Joshua leveled a stare onto her. "I realized you weren't worth my time," he said, pulling his eyes away. Serena bit her lips and there were tears in her eyes, but those blue eyes were cold. How had I not seen how she was until after she stabbed me? Joshua thought to himself with a silent groan. Just then, Serena's hand reached out and grabbed the gift Joshua had prepared for Chelsea. "Give that back, Serena," Joshua said coldly, reaching for the snatched gift. "You mean it isn't for me? You've been so cold lately so I thought you bought me something." Tears welled up in Serena's eyes as she put on a pitiful expression. Those that were in the classroom started murmuring things like how cold Joshua was being or that he was acting like an entitled rich brat by playing with people's feelings. Joshua ignored them. He grabbed the bag while simultaneously slapping Serena's hand. The skin instantly turned red, and the whispers grew even louder. "Oh, did I walk into a classroom or a drama shoot?" Chelsea's voice drawled from the open doorway. Chelsea stood there with her arms crossed and she looked over at Serena like she was the shot on the bottom of a shoe. "Don't you know any better than to lay her hands on other people's belongings?" Chelsea then scoffed as she walked into the room. "No, I guess you don't." Chelsea made her way to her seat and Joshua stood up, the newly reclaimed gift back in his hands. "Chelsea, I got this for you." He handed the gift over to her, but a frown quickly warped his face. "I actually should probably get you a new one since something filthy touched it." Serena's face paled but her eyes glimmered with unseen anger. Chelsea's lips lift up minutely into a smile. "It's wrapped, so it didn't actually touch it." Joshua's heart somersaulted in his chest when Chelsea took the gift from him. He had told himself that he would do whatever it took to fall in love with Chelsea, but he had a feeling that he was already halfway there. The whispers in the classroom grew even louder and Serena's ashen face started to twist into something darker. She opened her mouth as if she were about to say something but was suddenly stopped by the teacher entering. When class ended, Serena stormed out first, her head bent down, casting her face in shadow. Several students asked her what was wrong but she ignored them all. Some of them even shot him and Chelsea hateful stares. Joshua ignored them all as he tried to approach Chelsea. "Chelsea," he called out to the blonde. Her blue eyes flickered to him. "Right, I suppose I never thanked you for the gift," she said casually before leaving the room. "I guess I'll just have to try harder," he thought to himself. But unfortunately, he never had the chance to meet with Chelsea for the rest of the day. When he arrived home, Charles handed him a flash drive. "It's the information on Serena Weston." Joshua took the flash drive with a puzzled expression. "It's only been a day since I ordered this to be done. Just who in the world did Charles go to?" "Thank you," Joshua said instead. He headed upstairs to his room and plugged the flash drive into his computer. His eyes widened and he was filled with disbelief the longer he read. "So that's why Chelsea hates Serena." Joshua mumbled to himself, shocked by the information overload. The next day, Joshua was able to find Chelsea before class started. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "Do you want to know the real reason why I turned on Serena?" Joshua asked, drawing Chelsea's gaze to him. Chelsea didn't show any outwardly reaction other than a raised eyebrow. "I found she was planning on killing me after marrying me," Joshua told her, revealing a little about what he knew of the future without being too obvious. Chelsea's eyes widened and horrified expression crossed her usually charming and cold face. "I knew she was after your money but I didn't know she was planning on taking it that far." Joshua nodded in agreement with Chelsea's words. "But what does that have to do with me?" she asked, her face returning back to its calm exterior. Joshua uncrossed his arms and closed the distance between them. "It has everything to do with you. She's your half-sister, and you absolutely hate her and her mother," Joshua stated calmly, speaking directly into her ear so that no one else could overhear him. Chelsea's hands clenched at her sides. "Is that why you're pretending to pursue me now?" Joshua shook his head. "Honestly, I just found out about your connection with her yesterday. I chose you because she considered you as an enemy." Joshua leaned away and spoke in a normal tone, his eyes showing his honesty. "And I'm not pretending to pursue you. My past self was an idiot for never noticing you." Joshua thought he was imagining it, but he thought he saw a light blush dusting her cheeks. A small smile appeared on her cold face, softening it. "Fine. I'll allow you to prove your sincerity." With that, Chelsea left, leaving a stunned Joshua behind. A slow smile crept across his face when he registered her words. "It looks like I have a long road ahead of me." When the weekend came, he invited Chelsea out to dinner. The restaurant was on the higher end of the scale that catered to the upper echelon of society. The two of them were seated in a private room on the top floor. Joshua had met Chelsea there with a bouquet of flowers. "Thank you," she took them from him, a polite smile on her face. Joshua pulled the seat out for her. When she sat down, he pushed her chair in her, making sure not to push it in too close. Chelsea sat the flowers down beside her and turned her eyes onto him. "So, is this your plan to win me over?" flowers and a fancy dinner. Joshua's eyes flicked away and a small, embarrassed blush coating his cheeks and ears. To be honest, I'm not sure how to go about this, Joshua admitted. The best thing I can come up with is throwing my money around. But you're not someone who would be impressed by that. The Arnolds were entrepreneurs who had been in the business for generations, and their family was on par with Joshua's own family. Chelsea smiled at his words, finding his reaction amusing. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll correct you if needed. Few days later, the information he had requested on Chelsea came in. He threw it in a drawer without even looking at it. He decided it would be better to get to know her the old-fashioned way. During that time, he submitted the evidence he had tugged up on Serena to the police. It turned out that Serena's mother, who had worked as a housekeeper for a few different people, had blackmailed a few of her previous employers. Mr. Arnold was included in that list. And Serena. Joshua had laughed dryly, a sickening feeling in his heart. Serena, who was still considered a minor by law, had several sugar daddies on the side. Though he was still confused as to why she would play the long game with him while thinking about killing him when she had so many resources for income. Unless she really just wanted everything that came with his name. Joshua turned everything in, effectively getting rid of anyone who could help Serena. When Serena's angelic facade crumbled, her many followers and friends she had at school had distanced themselves from her. He wanted to end her life personally, but had decided against it. It would be far more favorable to just let her suffer for the rest of her life. Why didn't you or your family ever do anything against her and her mother? Joshua asked Chelsea one day. The two of them were at the beach and Chelsea was staring out at the sea, watching as the setting sun bathed the world in hues of pinks and purples. My parents were going to, but then he felt bad for Serena. She may have a child he didn't want, but she was still his. Chelsea had a wistful look on her face as she spoke. Joshua wrapped her hand in his, giving it a small, reassuring squeeze. The two of them walked along the beach, their senior year of high school officially behind them.